15 years after The Walking Dead officially debuted on TV, it's a very different experience revisiting the show that inspired a whole new wave of zombie horror. Back in 2010, I remember discovering The Walking Dead through a friend whose parents were watching the show. As a teenager, I was intrigued by the gruesome horror, and I immediately began watching the show on my own. Over the 11 years since that original series began broadcasting, I picked it up and put it down a handful of times as the series expanded and moved through different phases, but by the time the season 11 finale came out in 2021, I was firmly back on the TWD bandwagon. And now, 15 years on from its debut, with a growing number of spin-offs continuing to shape the world of these stories, I thought it was time to go back to the beginning. With that in mind, there were things that I was pleasantly surprised by, and others that made me long to be a first-time viewer once again. The Walking Dead doesn't have a clear ending. This can be seen as either a good or bad thing, depending on your feelings about The Walking Dead and its numerous spin-offs, but there isn't really a clear ending. I mean, there are plenty of characters that come and go, and death is a constant part of the series, but the story has endured and continues to push forward. During the main series run, there were 3 other shows that expanded the franchise: Fear the Walking Dead, Worlds Beyond, and Tales of the Walking Dead. Since TWD ended, a further 3 spin-offs have released dozens of episodes with some of the main cast from the original series returning. While it's nice to see the story continue, there are some aspects that feel a little too drawn out. Rick's story was compelling and intense, and for several seasons, he led TWD. When he disappeared, the show continued to thrive with other characters stepping up. But there is something satisfying and meaningful about endings, and the fact that the show keeps expanding the world, while interesting and new, makes it feel a little less special. So, get ready for the long haul. Shane Walsh and Rick Grimes lost more than most. The Walking Dead Season 1, Episode 1, Days Gone By, opens with Rick Grimes killing a young zombie girl, before jumping back in time before the outbreak to Rick and his buddy Shane Walsh on patrol together as local law enforcement. The boys share a meal and talk about their lives, showing how close these two were. After an incident, Rick wakes up months later in a hospital as what appears to be the sole survivor of some sort of massacre. Later in the same episode, we see Shane with Laurie, Rick's wife, with the pair now in a romantic relationship. As the show goes on, it's clear that Shane and Laurie connected, thinking Rick was dead and gone, but when Rick does meet up with his wife and former partner, it's an awkward encounter, and just the tip of the iceberg for their problems. It's hard to watch this back knowing what will happen between Shane and Rick, but that emotion is expertly coaxed out by the wonderful storytelling. No team compares to the original TWD lineup. Episode 1 briefly introduces Andrea and her sister, Amy, along with Dale, who have all formed a group with Shane, Laurie, and Carl. There is also a brief vocal debut from Stephen Yeun's Glenn at the end of the episode. A few more characters join this lineup in the following episode, like Carol and Daryl, along with Rick, who joins the larger group. This initial lineup is absolutely incredible, with a variety of personalities, and all the ingredients for a lot of drama and emotional moments. However, TWD is a show that isn't afraid to change the core cast due to the danger that lurks around every corner. By the end of the main series, Carol and Daryl are the only 2 survivors from this group to remain in the series, while Rick's survival is revealed by the fact he appears in a spin-off miniseries, The Ones Who Live. But nothing comes close to being as great as this first team of survivors. Despite becoming a survivor in the apocalypse, Rick almost died before the world ended. Rick Grimes is undoubtedly established as the central figure in the TWD franchise. Others take the reins and become more important over time, but Rick is the original survivor who makes the series move along and leads the various groups he becomes a part of. However, it's surprising to see just how close to death Rick comes in the premiere episode. Before the apocalypse, Rick and Shane attend a call-out to deal with a speeding vehicle. Upon arriving, they get into a shootout, and Rick gets shot twice. This leads to him being in a coma for an extended period of time that overlaps with the start of the outbreak. Had the wounds been more severe, or Rick died while in a coma, this could have easily been a very different story. The presence of a helicopter with a military logo serves as a precursor to the CRM. At 2 pivotal moments in the pilot episode, there are helicopters present. One comes early before Rick meets Morgan Jones, with a parked helicopter featuring a logo that has 2 swords crossing over and a wreath. The second comes near the end, when a helicopter flies over Atlanta. That first helicopter and the logo in particular are an interesting detail in hindsight, considering how much helicopters and mystery logos factor into the world of The Walking Dead later on when the CRM is introduced. However, it appears to be little more than a happy accident that this coincidental moment appeared. When Rick wakes up from the coma, it is a very short time after the outbreak began, potentially just a matter of months. In this time, it would have been strange to reorganize society into the machine that is the CRM, but it does provide an interesting circular moment for the series and its themes of humans looking for order. Morgan Jones should have left town with Rick, image made by Yida Chacon. Rick then meets Morgan Jones when Morgan knocks him over the head with a shovel. The pair spend very little time together, but they form a bond, and Morgan returns several times later in the main show and spin-offs like Fear the Walking Dead. At this early stage, Rick invites Morgan to come with him to seek help in Atlanta, but Morgan chooses to keep himself and his son behind, appearing to want to lay his wife to rest. His wife was already a zombie at this point, and Morgan only had his son, Dwayne, left. Unfortunately, soon after these events, Morgan loses his son when he is bitten by his zombified mother, and Morgan's life is forever changed. Had he gone with Rick at this stage, things would have turned out differently. Morgan's wife hints at something about walkers that never develops further. The Walking Dead spends a lot of time with the undead, known as the walkers, to Rick and his companions. However, for most of the series, they appear to be completely mindless creatures that only think about feeding their hunger. But in the debut episode, Morgan's wife displays some unusual behaviors for a zombie. She gravitates to the house where she died, where her husband and son now remain. And she repeatedly tries to open the door with the handle, suggesting that she has some sort of memory. Later, she murders her own son, which seems to clearly debunk the fact that there is any emotional connection tied to the shadows of a memory, but this idea is also never explored further later in the series. Even when other loved ones turn into walkers, hopes for a solution and cure don't last. Rick makes his way to